The floor cracked under my boots before I even understood what was happening. 1 second I was standing at attention in the gravity chamber, and the next, the plating beneath me groaned like it was about to give way. Instructor Vren stood behind the thick glass of the control booth, his clawed hand resting on a lever that controlled my fate, and he was not looking at me with concern. He was looking at me like a scientist looks at an insect he expects to crush. My name is Ethan Cole, and 3 months ago I was the only human accepted into the Combined Species Defense Academy that year. I had trained for this. I had studied every alien species that would sit beside me in class, every rule, every unspoken hierarchy. What I had not prepared for was Instructor Vren deciding, on my very first week, that humans did not belong here. He had already dismissed 2 of my crewmates. A boy named Leo Whitfield, quick with numbers but slow on his feet, had been sent home after failing a combat simulation Vren designed to be impossible. A girl named Grace Whitmore, brilliant at tactics, had broken under the pressure of endless verbal tests that seemed built only to humiliate her. I was the last human standing, and Vren intended to end that streak today. "You missed the parry sequence 4 times, he said, his voice buzzing through the translator collar around his neck. "A cadet who cannot defend a simple strike does not deserve to wear this uniform. Report to Gravity Chamber 3. Every cadet in the room went still. I had heard whispers about that chamber since my first day. It was where Vren sent people he had already decided would fail, not to train them, but to break them quietly, without witnesses, so the academy records would show a resignation instead of a dismissal. I did not argue. I walked. The chamber was small, round, with gray metal plating on the floor, and padded walls that had clearly absorbed the weight of many falling bodies before mine. Vren stood above me in the booth, his 4 fingers hovering over the controls like a conductor ready to begin a performance only he found entertaining. "You will stand in the center," he said. "You will remain standing for as long as your body allows. When you fall, this session ends, and so does your time here." "How high are you taking it?" I asked. "High enough," he said, "to teach your species something it has never learned: limits." I stepped into the center of the chamber and planted my feet. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the strange calm that comes right before something enormous begins. I thought about my father, who spent 30 years working in the deep mining stations near Jupiter, where gravity plating failures were common and the work never stopped, no matter how heavy the air felt. He never once complained. To him, heavy days were simply days. Vren keyed the console. 2G, he said. The weight pressed down on my shoulders like invisible hands. It was heavy, but not unfamiliar. I had felt worse under a loaded bar in a gym built for cadets twice my size. I held my stance. 2.5, Vren said, and I heard something sharp in his voice, like disappointment that I had not yet buckled. My spine compressed, my breath grew short. An old injury in my knee, one I had carried since childhood, began to ache in a way that made my whole leg tremble. I widened my stance and locked my core the way every coach I ever had taught me to do when everything in my body wanted to quit. 3, he said. The chamber groaned around me, metal flexing under pressure it had rarely been asked to hold this early in a test. My vision narrowed at the edges, dark creeping in from both sides like curtains closing on a stage. And still, I stood. I thought about every mountain climber who had ever pushed through thin air, every diver who had gone deeper than their body wanted to allow, every human who had looked at an impossible number on a screen and decided the number was wrong about them. I smiled. Vren's crest twitched behind the glass. A small motion I had learned meant surprise. He had not expected that. 3.5, he snapped. Faster than before, as if trying to catch me off guard. The gravity dropped onto me like a wave crashing over a swimmer who refused to be pulled under. My knees bent, not from failure but from instinct, dropping my center of mass lower, the way a fighter braces before a strike. Sweat ran down my back and pooled at the base of my spine. My jaw ached from clenching so hard. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape the pressure crushing my chest. And still I smiled. Because somewhere in that moment, I understood exactly what Vren was really testing. He was not measuring my muscles or my bones. He was measuring whether I would choose to give up when every reasonable signal in my body told me to fold. And that was the one thing his species, for all their careful strength and precise engineering, had never needed to develop. Their world had never demanded it from them. Mine had, over and over, for thousands of years. 4G, Vren said, and his voice cracked slightly, as if he did not fully believe the number appearing on his own console. Something in my lower back gave a sharp warning, not a break, but a clear signal that I was close to a line I should not cross carelessly. I breathed in slow, controlled counts, the same rhythm climbers use when the air grows too thin to waste on panic. I did not fall. Above the booth, through the tinted glass, shapes began to gather. Word had spread fast through the academy, the way it always does among bored cadets and curious instructors. More faces pressed against the glass, watching a human refuse to collapse under weight that had already ended 2 other careers that week. 4.5, Vren said, and this time it did not sound like a command. It sounded almost like a question, as if he were asking the universe to explain what he was witnessing. The room roared with strain, the machinery fighting to hold the field steady. My vision tunneled until Vren's face in the booth was the only clear thing left in the world. My legs shook, my arms trembled at my sides, but deep in my mind, some old and stubborn part of me, built by generations who survived ice, hunger, and endless labor, quietly whispered that this was nothing new. This was simply another heavy day. 5, Vren said, and his hand hesitated over the controls for the first time since the test began. I dropped to one knee, not from collapse but from choice. A controlled kneel meant to save what little strength I had left. My chest heaved. Every joint in my body screamed for rest, but I was still conscious. I was still aware. I had not fallen, and in this chamber, falling was the only true failure. Vren cut the gravity field instantly, the pressure lifting off my body so suddenly that I nearly toppled forward from the release itself. I caught myself on one hand, breathing hard, drenched in sweat, my muscles burning with a fire that felt strangely satisfying. I looked up at the booth, expecting to see disappointment or anger on Vren's face. Instead, for the first time since I had met him, his crest was raised, not flattened. I had only ever seen that motion once before, in a training video, labeled as a rare sign of respect among his kind. He stepped out of the booth and walked into the chamber himself, his movements slower than usual, almost careful. He looked down at me, still kneeling, still catching my breath, and said something I never expected to hear from him. "I misjudged your species," he said quietly. "I believed your bodies were soft because your world seemed gentle from a distance. I did not consider what it takes to survive on a world that constantly tests its people in ways they cannot see from orbit." I managed a tired laugh. "We call that Tuesday," I said. His crest rose higher, a full display of approval I had never witnessed him give anyone. Around the chamber, cadets from other species leaned closer against the glass, whispering among themselves, some in awe, some clearly annoyed that their own doubts about humans had just been proven wrong in front of everyone. "Report to advanced conditioning tomorrow," Vren said. 0400. Bring anyone from your class who still doubts what you just did. I nodded, too exhausted to speak clearly. But inside, something settled into place. I was not here by accident. I was not here because the academy needed a token human to fill a seat. I was here because somewhere deep in my bones, generations of struggle had built something that no gravity chamber could easily break. As I walked out of the chamber, legs still shaking, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass door. My uniform was soaked, my hair damp against my forehead, my eyes tired but steady. Behind me, Vren watched with an expression that had changed completely from the one he wore when I first walked in. He was not looking at me like an insect anymore. He was looking at me like a warning he intended to send to every other instructor in the academy. A warning that read simply, "Do not underestimate a species built by a world that never once made survival easy." And for the first time since arriving at the academy, I walked back to my quarters not with fear of what tomorrow might bring, but with a quiet, steady confidence that whatever challenge came next, I had already proven exactly what I was capable of carrying.